You may think Fallout's exaggerating, but it's just America with extra radiation. It feels like a parody until you realize it's mocking the world you live in, a world sold on the idea of endless prosperity only to be burned down by its own greed. The world of Fallout takes place in an alternate history where the fusion-powered technology led to a very different future, one where the American dream promised us everything and in the end it took it all away. Fusion didn't just change the way that people lived, it transformed the entire world. It became the most valuable resource, shaping everything from politics to war. But with all this futuristic tech, the world of Fallout still feels stuck in the 1950s, simply because in this universe America never experienced the cultural revolutions of the 60s and the 70s. No civil rights movements, no anti-war protests, and no counterculture. It just never happened. Instead, people clung to that good old post-World War II optimism. Shiny cars, happy families, and patriotic slogans that hid a darker truth underneath. People went on with their lives, buying gadgets, smiling, and tending to their gardens, while the government ran things from the background, tightening their control on people's lives every single day. This shiny, perfect world of progress is a sharp contrast to everything around it slowly falling apart. By 2066, the world was teetering on the edge. China, running out of oil, invaded Alaska, and the US, fearing the worst, annexed Canada to secure vital resources to make up for what they lost. They didn't just send in regular troops, they unleashed power armor, fusion-powered tanks, and marched right through Canada to secure their supply lines. And by now, the Cold War was in full swing. Fallout makes that clear. It is not just a hint, you're dropped right in the center of it. Soldiers are marching through quiet neighborhoods, food rationing and civil defense drills are happening. The signs are all there. As things got more chaotic, the US government began to close in tighter. Borders were sealed, surveillance became the norm, and anyone who disagreed with the government was labeled un-American. Fear became a tool, a way to promise safety, comfort, and survival, but only for a price. And that's exactly where Vault-Tec saw their golden opportunity. With their massive funding and government contracts, they started pitching underground vaults as salvation. Just like Cold War-era defense companies, Vault-Tec cashed in on fear, pretending to protect the future while quietly working behind closed doors to make sure that they controlled it.
We have over 100 vaults spread across America. Enough for each of you to claim several, where you can play out your own ideas for how to create the perfect conditions for humanity, whatever you want to do. No one needs to know.
By the 2070s, American democracy was a shell of its former self. Corporations were no longer just influencing the government, they had practically become the government, tugging and pulling the strings on their puppet politicians. Vault-Tec was right in the middle of the paranoia and chaos, helping to perpetuate a lie that sealed civilization's fate. The worst part is that Vault-Tec hasn't even done its worst yet. There's a theory that's been whispered through forums and fan threads for years that has all been but confirmed by the Fallout TV show, that the apocalypse wasn't just expected, but that it was engineered.
But we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical. How can you guarantee results?
By dropping the bomb ourselves.
Vault-Tec and the government may have pulled the trigger themselves just to make sure they'd be the only ones left standing, and if that is true, it changes everything. When Vault-Tec first showed up, their pitch almost sounded noble, to protect the American people in case the worst happens. Yet it didn't really take long for those good intentions to get buried underneath piles of cash and the juicy government contracts. Once they got a taste of that sweet federal funding, they realized something. Nuclear war was not just a threat. It was a business opportunity. People were lining up to pay thousands for a spot underground, not just because the bombs had dropped, but simply because they might. Money was just the beginning. The real jackpot came once Vault-Tec understood the kind of power that they had, not just to survive the apocalypse, but to reshape what came after it. They didn't want to just save people, they wanted to study them, control them, turn their vaults into a massive social experiment to test which version of humanity was worth rebuilding in their vision. And the scariest part, they weren't open about any of it. Vault-Tec didn't operate like a Saturday morning cartoon villain with an evil laugh and a master plan. They were much worse. They smiled at you, thanked you for your cooperation, and then walked you straight into the experiment with a clipboard in their hand and a bounce in their step. It's what happens when capitalism, paranoia, and unchecked authority are sealed together behind a blast door for centuries. Robco, another tech giant in the Fallout universe, also had its robotic fingers in just about every corner of society. They made the Mr. Handy robots, those overly polite floating assistants that you can't decide whether you love or hate, and the Securitrons, the mechanical peacekeepers patrolling the strip armed to the teeth. Just like Vault-Tec, Robco blurred the line between convenience and control. Their machines were everywhere, in homes, on the streets, and even enforcing curfews. They weren't just helpful tools, they were reminders of who was really watching. Even the Pip-Boy, the trusty little wrist computer that you carry around in every single Fallout game, was made by Robco. It tracks your health, your gear, and your surroundings, and maybe a little more than you'd like. It's not just a survival tool, it's surveillance that you can't take off. All of this leads back to Mr. House, the brilliant reclusive founder of Robco. He built his empire on the idea that the future could be better so long as he was the one controlling it.
Vegas always was one of a kind. What you see down on the Strip is just a fraction of the city's former glory, and yet, more than an echo, I preserved its spirit.
Vault-Tec might have sealed you in a vault, but Robco made sure you were still being watched long after the world ended. And that's the common thread between all these corporations. They're not just products of the pre-war world, they define it. They're the perfect embodiment of 1950s corporate patriotism, a smiling salesman promising safety and order while slipping something sinister into the fine print. You don't need to look hard to see that Fallout is absolutely drenched in propaganda. It's not subtle, and it's definitely not supposed to be. From the moment you load into any of the games, you're hit with the iconic grinning Vault Boy, patriotic slogans, and upbeat jingles that just feel a little too cheerful for the end of the world. Vault-Tec's whole aesthetic pulls straight from mid-20th century wartime marketing. Think those Uncle Sam posters with the finger pointing and all, except now, instead of enlisting you in the army, they're convincing you to march into an underground coffin. It's war marketing rebranded as peace of mind. Vault-Tec isn't even the only company trying to profit off of this nuclear fear either. Companies like Pulowski Preservation tried to cash in on the same fear, building their own miniature nuclear protection shelters. But just like everything else sold under the banner of safety, none of them actually worked. These smiling faces and catchy slogans weren't just about keeping people safe, they were about keeping people in line. The entire brand of Vault-Tec was built on selling obedience as optimism. They would always tell you, trust us, we're the good guys. And once that trust was bought, it was turned around and sold, and after that, everything else was fair game. But propaganda didn't just stop at Vault-Tec's doorstep. Take Nuka-Cola for example. The name alone is a dead giveaway, a direct nod to Coca-Cola, which during the Cold War was far more than just a drink. It was a cultural weapon. Presidents would use it for diplomacy, soldiers drank it overseas. It was marketed as the American way, fizzy freedom capped in a bottle. Fallout takes the idea and it cranks that to 11. Nuka-Cola is not just a beverage anymore, it's a brand empire. There are theme parks, factory tours, collectibles, and even an entire DLC dedicated to it. It's colorful, patriotic, radioactive, and entirely everywhere. But this isn't just satire, it's critique, it's mockery even. Fallout uses Nuka-Cola to reflect on how a consumer product can become a complete part of national identity, how sugar, style, and slogans can be used to distract people from the poison underneath. And once you start seeing those connections, they're everywhere. Almost every piece of media in Fallout is a warped reflection of something real. Pip-Boy games like Red Menace mock Cold War era scare tactics. The term Red Menace itself was used to fuel anti-communist fear in the US, and Fallout turns it into a goofy Donkey Kong knockoff, which somehow makes it feel more unsettling. Radio stations warn about spies in your neighborhood, community watch programs proudly root out un-American and fascist behavior. It's all a twisted echo of mid-century hysteria. Exaggerated, yes, but never far from the truth. Even the Vault-Tec cartoon reels, like the Your Special series, play a major part in this. They present horrifying scenarios with jazz music and smiling narration.
Be sure to know your limits, or you may find it challenging to escape from hazardous scenarios.
It's Bugs Bunny meets psychological conditioning. At first glance, you might laugh. It's satire. It's dark humor. But underneath that is a much more serious question, one that maybe all of us have asked before, but one that Fallout certainly does keep asking. What if the American dream was always a marketing campaign? What if all those promises, the family, the picket fence, the opportunity, were never about freedom but just about control? What if they were designed to keep people hopeful enough to stay quiet and scared enough to never ask who's really benefiting? Because Fallout doesn't just aim at the corrupt corporations, it goes deeper. much deeper. It questions the foundation that those corporations were built on. It asks whether the whole system, the one we're told to believe in, was always meant to serve someone else. Look at Mr. House yet again. He's not rebuilding America because he believes in it, he's rebuilding it so that he can run it. House preserved his wealth, his mind, and his power, not for the greater good, but to reshape the world in his image. He's a billionaire turned technocrat who sees democracy as liability and survival as a brand. To him, the American dream is just another tool, proving that even after the world burned, that ideology remained. The billboards stayed standing, the mascots, slogans, and recruitment posters were sun-bleached, bullet-ridden, and sometimes glowing, but still there. And in Fallout, those aren't just leftovers of a dead world. They're prophecies to be learned, followed, and praised. Now, I'm not diving too deeply into the vaults here because that deserves a video of its own, so if you'd like to see that, do let me know down below, but there is one that sums up a lot of what we've been talking about. Vault 11 in Fallout New Vegas. This vault took Vault-Tec's twisted logic and made it law. Every year, the residents had to vote for one person to be sacrificed, believing that it was the only way to survive simply because an automated computer message had told them so. And at first, they did it out of fear, but over time, it became a ritual.
Yes. Come on. I mean it. What? Start a revolution? Laws don't outlast their governments. Roy, all we have to do is wait until someone from Justice Block gets picked for overseer. Then we have them change the law back.
Political blocks formed just like the Justice Block, and they started running campaigns, propaganda posters, smear ads, and one of the most insane tactics was accusing someone of being a communist sympathizer. Post-war, when communism was long gone, or should have been, but the fear lived on. And that's kind of the point. Fallout's world didn't forget about the old fears, it just absorbed them. Just look at Diamond City. The biggest fear there is synths. People whisper about infiltration, neighbors are acting different, families are turning on each other. It's the Red Scare with a new skin. The language, the paranoia, the scapegoating, it's all the same. Even as you walk in, you're greeted with class tension.
Poor and stupid.
Oh, don't act like you don't know. There's two types of people in this town. The ones living in the stands and everyone beneath us.
Ann Codman at the barber sneers at you like you're below her, and in her eyes, you definitely are. That sense of superiority, that social divide, it's all still alive, 200 years later. And it's not just Diamond City. Everyone's rebuilding the old world, one ideology at a time in their own vision. Take the NCR. They didn't rise from the ashes by reinventing the wheel, they copied the blueprint. A federal government, a standing army, a flag waving proudly in the dust, and propaganda to back it all. They talk about freedom, justice, and unity, but underneath it's bureaucracy, expansionism, and greed. It's the United States with a new coat of dirt. The Brotherhood of Steel, they took the old military and turned it into a technocult. They don't serve the people, they just hoard their knowledge. They cloak themselves in valor and in nobility, and they speak of grand missions, but they'd rather let a town burn and innocents die than risk losing a piece of valuable technology. And finally, the Enclave. They're not a faction, they're the remnant, the last gasp of the old US government, huddled on oil rigs and in bunkers waiting. They didn't just survive the war, they practically just skipped it. And now they want the world back. Every time they show up, they bring the same old message: purity, control, and restoration, but only in their vision. Their tech is decades ahead, and their nationalism is centuries old, and their cruelty is absolutely justified, at least to them. In Fallout 3, their president is quite literally just an AI, spitting out 1950s-style propaganda with a soothing voice and patriotic tunes.
Just who is the Enclave? Why, now that's simple. The Enclave is you, America. The Enclave is your sister, your aunt, your friend, your neighbor. Let's talk about government, shall we? Or more specifically, your government, dear America. The Enclave.
Even with all of these factions adapting to these new ideologies that still existed pre-war, they never really changed after the bombs fell. They just kept the same old machine running. But the real horror here was Vault-Tec. They were never supposed to last this long, yet their shadow stretches across the wasteland. Vault 81 in Fallout 4 is still functioning. Vault 33 in the Fallout TV show is still functioning, and yet still running some experiments due to Vault 31. But some of these vaults were abandoned, some of these vaults collapsed, and yet still a few of them endured. And the effects of their experiments, the social conditioning, the mutations, and the surveillance, shape the world above still. Super mutants and the FEV virus were all tied to government or Vault-Tec science. Human experimentation didn't end with the war, in fact, it thrived in its aftermath. And the people, they didn't just survive to the end, they adapted to it. They built religions out of radiation, they clung to Vault-Tec mascots like security blankets. Even raider gangs wear American symbols like armor, not just because they believe in them, but because they work. The apocalypse didn't erase American ideology, it just mutated it, weaponized it, repackaged it, and sold it to the highest bidders. Because in Fallout, the scariest part is not that the world ended, it's that even after the world ended, people still believed. In the flags, in the brands, in the corporations, and the systems that killed them first. Ideology did not die in the Great War, it just changed its uniform, and now it owns the Wasteland, just like it did before.